One patient with sciatica tells me that walking is the only thing that helps. But the other person says that the longer I walk, the worse my leg gets. What's going on here? Now, the interesting thing is that both of those responses actually tells us something very useful. The biggest mistakes that people make is assuming that either walking or not walking is the best thing for their sciatica. And the reality is far more nuanced than that. Some people, they wake up stiff, they're sore, they're uncomfortable. They take a few steps around the house and gradually start loosening up. They might tell me, I'm stiff at first, but it eases once I get moving, or walking takes the edge off. If that's your experience, you're certainly not alone. But there's another group of people who tell a very different story. They start walking and initially feel okay, but then after 5, 10, 15 minutes, something begins to change. The calf starts aching, the foot begins tingling, and the leg feels heavier. The back tightens up. Sometimes they start limping, and sometimes they have to stop and bend forward. Some people tell me, I don't trust my legs anymore. Now, walking with sciatica is such a useful clue. What you're seeing is what I call a movement tolerance pattern. Walking isn't just exercise. Walking is a test. It shows us how your back, your hips, your muscles, and that nerve respond to repeated movement and load over time. Now, whether walking increases or decreases your pain, both of those responses tell us something. One of the reasons walking can help some people is that movement often reduces stiffness. It encourages that circulation, it gets the muscles working, it changes how those joints are moving, and it provides the nervous system with healthy movement input. And that's why some people feel dramatically better once they've been moving for a few minutes. The body sort of seems to loosen up and those symptoms subside, and walking becomes one of the most helpful things they can do. But opposite can also happen. For some people, that walking increases the demands placed on an already irritated system. The low back, the pelvis, the hips, they all start to struggle under that load every step. And if that system is already sensitive, symptoms can then gradually build up the longer that activity continues. Now, the most important thing to understand is that walking itself isn't automatically good or bad. The response matters. So if walking takes the edge off, that tells us something. But if things get heavier, weaker, more painful, that also tells us something. One of the questions I often ask patients isn't just simply, can you walk? But rather, what happens when you walk? Do the symptoms get better? Do they stay the same? Or do they end up spreading further down the leg? And does the leg feel weaker? These details matter a lot. And if this sounds like you, what's the most important thing you can do? The first thing to avoid is that temptation to go from doing absolutely nothing to attempting a marathon walk, something crazy because you've heard that walking is good for sciatica. Instead, just start with some short walks, ease into it, and think of walking as a dosage, just like exercises. The goal isn't to prove how far you can push through the discomfort. The goal is to understand how your body responds. So pay attention to how long you can walk before those symptoms start changing. Notice whether symptoms stay localized or travel further down the leg. Notice whether you recover quickly afterwards or whether you're flared up for hours on end. Those observations can be incredibly useful. If walking helps, consider using it in smaller, more frequent doses through the day. If walking consistently worsens symptoms, it may be worth reducing that distance temporarily until you get to the bottom of it. Now, if walking is causing worsening numbness, weakness, heaviness, or symptoms spread further down the leg, that's not something you should simply ignore. Now, it's also important to understand what walking does not automatically mean. If walking hurts, it doesn't automatically mean your spine is ruined. If walking helps, it doesn't mean that it's fixed. And if walking worsens symptoms, it doesn't mean that you should never walk again. If walking consistently improves symptoms, that may suggest movement is helping reduce some of the stiffness or sensitivity within that system. If walking consistently worsens symptoms as the distance increases, that may suggest the system is sensitive to load, endurance, posture, or ongoing nerve irritation. And if the leg starts feeling weak or heavy, that's particularly important information to assess properly. That's why I often tell patients that walking is one of the most useful things we can observe. Not because walking is the answer, but because walking gives us information. It shows us how the body behaves under repeat movement, helps us understand your tolerance, and helps identify patterns. Now, at the end of the day, walking can absolutely help you understand your sciatica, but it doesn't replace assessment. The bigger question is this: why? Why does your nerve respond that way to movement in the first place? Why? Why does the person that walks feel better or the person that doesn't feel worse? And that's exactly what a sciatica assessment is designed to help answer. Now, at Aligned Chiro, we assess factors such as posture, spinal movement, nerve function, and symptom behaviour. We want to understand not only where you're feeling the symptoms, but why they're happening. And where clinically indicated, we may also utilise scans such as X-rays or MRI to help build a clearer picture. Just to be clear, the goal isn't simply to tell you to walk more or walk less. The goal is to understand what's irritating that nerve and determine the most appropriate next step. So if walking changes a sciatica, whether it's making you better or worse, don't ignore that information. If you'd like to learn more, keep an eye out for the upcoming webinar where we'll dive deeper into the causes of sciatica, why different people respond differently to movement, and the approaches available to help people recover. And if you'd like answers sooner, book a sciatica assessment at Aligned Chiro. We'll assess your posture, your spinal movement, your nerve function, and symptom behaviour so you can better understand what's irritating the nerve and what the next step should be. You don't have to keep wondering whether walking is helping or hurting. Let's sort this out.